In a village far away, there is an ancient tale passed down through generations. It's about a group of travelers eagerly awaiting the arrival of a great master. Each person had a precise vision of what this master would look like, how he would arrive, and the profound impact he would have on their lives. But when an ordinary traveler, unassuming in appearance, passed through their village with powerful lessons to offer, none of the travelers recognized him. His message did not match their expectations, so the village missed the opportunity to learn from him. This parable, simple yet profound, holds the key to a timeless question: why don't the Jews recognize Jesus as the Messiah? In ancient Palestine, during the time of Jesus, the Jewish people were deeply immersed in a painful history of oppression. They had been ruled by foreign powers for centuries: the Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and finally, the Romans. Under the weight of these constant invasions, a collective yearning began to grow, driven by ancient prophecies that foretold the coming of a great leader. This leader, the Messiah, would not only bring spiritual redemption but would also restore Israel's political and social sovereignty. The Messiah was expected to be a powerful figure, a warrior king, who would lead Israel to freedom from its oppressors. This expectation was rooted in ancient Jewish prophecies, most notably the words of the prophet Isaiah, who spoke of a time when a child would be born to lead Israel, and the government would be upon his shoulders. The Jewish people envisioned the Messiah as a mighty ruler who would rise to the throne of King David, expel the foreign invaders, and bring lasting peace and prosperity to the land. This was not just a symbolic expectation, it was a concrete, tangible hope. They longed for immediate, earthly justice. They thirsted for the end of their suffering under Roman rule and for the restoration of their nation's power. Then, Jesus arrived, an ordinary carpenter from Galilee. He didn't come as a mighty conqueror. He didn't ride on a white horse, nor did he lead a military rebellion. Instead, he offered a message that seemed almost unbearable to the ears of those who longed for immediate liberation. Love your enemies, bless those who curse you, pray for those who persecute you, he taught. He did not call for the overthrow of Rome. Instead, he spoke of love, peace, and spiritual transformation. This was where the great divide occurred. Jesus' teachings were not about earthly power or military victory. They were about changing the hearts and minds of people, about transcending worldly conflicts and embracing a higher truth. For many Jews, this was not the Messiah they had expected. They were looking for someone who would deliver them from their immediate political oppression, someone who would fight their battles with the sword. But Jesus called them to fight battles of the Spirit, not of the flesh. He offered a vision of peace that began in the hearts of individuals, not through political power or military might. This divergence between popular expectations and the reality of Jesus' mission made it difficult for many to recognize him as the Messiah. Just as in the parable, where the travelers missed the opportunity because the master did not match their expectations, many Jews could not see the Messiah in Jesus because he did not fit their mold. The idea of a spiritual Messiah, one who would bring liberation not through political might but through love and forgiveness, was simply too radical and too different from what they had imagined. The essence of this clash lies in the Jewish understanding of the Messiah. For centuries, the Messiah was envisioned as a political and military leader who would restore the kingdom of Israel, rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, and establish universal peace. These were not just spiritual hopes, they were tangible, concrete expectations. The Messiah would be a real, earthly king, a descendant of David, whose arrival would be marked by visible, global transformation. But when Jesus came, he did not fulfill these concrete prophecies. He did not restore the political sovereignty of Israel, and the temple in Jerusalem remained in ruins. Instead, he preached a message of inner transformation and spiritual renewal. He spoke of a kingdom that was not of this world, a kingdom of love and peace that transcended the immediate political struggles of the day. This is the fundamental reason why Jews have traditionally not recognized Jesus as the Messiah. From a Jewish perspective, the Messiah was meant to bring about tangible, visible changes in the world, an end to suffering, the restoration of Israel, and the establishment of a universal era of peace. Jesus did not fulfill these expectations, and this disconnect between what was expected and what was delivered created a barrier that persists to this day. However, it's important to understand that this does not mean the Jewish concept of the Messiah is flawed or that Jews reject Jesus out of spite. It's simply a matter of different interpretations and expectations. The Jewish Messiah is not a purely spiritual figure, but one who will bring about a radical transformation in the world, a transformation that is still awaited by many in the Jewish community. This divergence between Jewish and Christian views of the Messiah is a profound one, rooted in centuries of history and tradition. It challenges us to think deeply about the nature of expectation and how it shapes our understanding of the world. Expectations can be powerful forces, shaping our perceptions and even preventing us from recognizing what is right in front of us. Just as the villagers in the story missed the master because he didn't meet their expectations, so too have many missed the message of Jesus because it didn't fit their preconceived notions of what the Messiah should be. The story of Jesus, therefore, is not just about religion, it is also about the power of expectation. It reminds us that sometimes the most transformative experiences are those that do not come in the form we expect. They may be quiet, humble, and unexpected, but they have the power to change us in ways we could never have imagined. So, the question remains, how do we recognize the Messiah when he comes? The answer, perhaps, lies not in looking for grand, earth-shattering events but in recognizing the quiet, profound transformations that happen within us. The true Messiah, whether in the form of Jesus or in any other incarnation, is not someone who seeks to dominate the world through power and force, but someone who changes the world from the inside out, one heart at a time. And in this quiet revolution, we find the true meaning of peace, justice, and love, values that transcend all expectations. The story of Jesus is a deeply profound one, not only because of his life and teachings but also because of the profound theological divide that exists in how he is perceived by different religious traditions. For many Jews, Jesus remains an influential historical figure, admired for his remarkable spiritual insights and moral teachings, yet he is not regarded as the Messiah they have been waiting for. But why? What lies beneath this non-recognition, and what does it tell us about the expectations and beliefs that shape our understanding of history and spirituality? To truly understand the Jewish perspective on Jesus as the Messiah, we must first dive into the rich and centuries-old concept of what the Messiah was meant to be. For Jews, the Messiah is not a spiritual teacher or a prophet. The Messiah is a king, one who will bring about tangible, visible, and irreversible changes to the world. The Messiah's arrival will not be subtle or ambiguous, but will be a clear, unmistakable revolution in human history. It is not just a matter of personal salvation or inner transformation, but a global and political change. The Messiah, as foretold in Jewish tradition, would restore the kingdom of Israel, rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, and bring about an era of peace and justice that would touch every nation and every individual. This is the kind of Messiah the Jews have been expecting for millennia, and this is the Messiah that they continue to await. When we examine the life of Jesus, we see that while his teachings were profound and transformative, they did not align with this specific vision. Jesus did not come to restore Israel's political sovereignty, nor did he rebuild the temple. He did not usher in a world of visible peace, and the conflicts between nations continued long after his death. To the Jewish people, this created a profound disconnect. How could Jesus be the Messiah if he did not fulfill these tangible, prophetic tasks? The expectations of the Messiah were grounded in a vision of transformation that was not only spiritual but also practical, political, and global in scope. From the Jewish perspective, the Messiah would accomplish these feats with undeniable, visible signs. Yet, to Christians, Jesus represents the fulfillment of a much deeper, more spiritual prophecy. Christians believe that Jesus is not just a man, but the incarnate God, God himself come to earth to redeem humanity from its sins. This is where the divide deepens. Judaism sees God as wholly indivisible, unchanging, and beyond human form. The idea of God taking on human flesh and experiencing human suffering and death is fundamentally at odds with the Jewish understanding of the divine. For Christians, Jesus' life, death, and resurrection are the pivotal events that open the way for eternal salvation. They believe that through Jesus' sacrifice, humanity is reconciled with God. This Christian notion of original sin and redemption through Christ presents a radical departure from Jewish theology, which teaches that each person is responsible for their own actions, and the path to redemption lies in sincere repentance, prayer, and acts of charity. The clash between these two worldviews is not merely theological, it is rooted in deeply ingrained traditions and historical experiences. From the very beginning, after Jesus' death and resurrection, the initial followers of Jesus were Jews who continued to observe Jewish laws and traditions. However, as Christianity began to spread, tensions grew. What had initially been seen as a sect within Judaism soon became an independent religion. This shift was particularly stark after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, which marked a pivotal moment in Jewish history. The loss of the temple and the subsequent exile of the Jewish people fueled a desire for a Messiah who would restore the nation, both spiritually and politically. Jesus' followers, however, began to see him not only as a spiritual leader but as the literal fulfillment of the prophecies, claiming him as the Messiah, the Son of God. This divide between the Jewish and Christian communities deepened over time, especially when Christianity was adopted as the official religion of the Roman Empire under Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. From that point on, Jews were increasingly persecuted for not accepting Jesus as the Messiah. The centuries that followed were marked by violence, exclusion, and brutal treatment of Jews, culminating in tragic events such as the Crusades and the Inquisition. The accusation that Jews were responsible for the crucifixion of Jesus led to widespread hostility and discrimination. This history of persecution is deeply ingrained in the collective memory of the Jewish people and remains a source of pain and trauma to this day. In the midst of this historical struggle, it is important to remember that the Jewish rejection of Jesus as the Messiah is not a denial of his spiritual greatness. Many Jewish scholars acknowledge Jesus as a significant historical figure and a teacher of moral and ethical values. However, for them, the Messiah is a human figure, a divinely chosen leader who will bring about concrete, historical change. The Jewish expectation of the Messiah is grounded in the belief that the world will be transformed by the actions of this leader, who will bring peace, justice, and harmony to all nations. Until this transformation occurs, Jews continue to wait in silent hope for the arrival of the true Messiah, who will make his presence known in a way that will be as clear and undeniable as the sunrise after a long, dark night. This difference in understanding, the Jewish vision of the Messiah as a political and historical figure versus the Christian vision of Jesus as the divine Savior, illustrates the profound divergence in these two traditions. It is a divergence that has shaped the course of history, affecting not only theological debates but also the relationships between these two communities. Despite the centuries of tension, it is crucial to recognize that these differences do not diminish the value of each tradition. Instead, they reflect the diverse and complex ways in which humanity seeks to understand the infinite mystery of the divine. In the end, the story of Jesus and the Messiah is not just a theological debate, it is a story of expectation, hope, and the search for meaning in a complex and often painful world. Whether one views Jesus as the Messiah or as a great spiritual teacher, his life and message continue to inspire millions, challenging us to think deeply about the nature of salvation, redemption, and the possibility of a transformed world. And perhaps, in the end, the most important lesson is not about who the Messiah is, but about how we can live in a way that brings light into the darkness, offering peace and justice to a world that so desperately needs it. The painful rift between Jewish and Christian relations runs deep, shaped by centuries of misunderstanding, conflict, and suffering. For many Jews, the idea of accepting Jesus as the Messiah is not only a theological struggle but also an emotional and historical one. This divide is rooted in events that, over time, inflicted profound wounds on the Jewish community, wounds that are still felt today. Let us take a moment to reflect on the tragedies that have defined Jewish-Christian relations throughout history. Imagine entire communities whose lives and homes were brutally torn apart during the Crusades, as they were massacred in the name of a faith they did not recognize. Picture the mass expulsions, such as the one that led to the exile of Jews from Spain in 1492, a catastrophe that left a trail of devastation and despair. These events were not mere footnotes in history, they were defining moments, shaping a collective memory of resistance, survival, and loss. For many Jews, the idea of accepting Jesus as the Messiah, whom they were taught was a central figure in the religion that had justified these acts, would be unimaginable. Recognizing Jesus as the Messiah would require confronting not just theological differences, but also the painful history of persecution, rejection, and violence. It would demand a renunciation of a long-held memory that their suffering was sanctioned in the name of faith. This memory is a barrier, an emotional wall built from centuries of oppression and hardship. However, in the wake of the indescribable horrors of the 20th century, especially the tragedy of the Holocaust, there has been a shift in the dialogue between Jews and Christians. The Holocaust, which brought unimaginable suffering to the Jewish people, also forced the world to confront the darkest parts of its history. Out of this darkness emerged a renewed effort for reconciliation. The Second Vatican Council in 1965 issued the historic Nostra Aetate Declaration, a profound step toward healing. For the first time, the Catholic Church formally rejected the idea that Jews were collectively responsible for the death of Jesus, condemning all forms of anti-Semitism. This was not just a theological shift, but a deeply human acknowledgement of the need for healing and understanding. Yet, despite these positive strides, the historical weight of centuries of tension still lingers like a shadow. The wounds caused by centuries of conflict and misunderstanding cannot be erased with words alone. They require a healing process that goes beyond intellectual discourse. As Jewish philosopher Martin Buber insightfully pointed out in his work Two Types of Faith, true reconciliation demands not just theological discussion, but deep emotional and historical healing. This healing is difficult, for it requires confronting painful memories that have shaped both communities' identities. Jews and Christians, despite sharing deep spiritual roots, have taken divergent paths due to centuries of misunderstanding, alienation, and suffering. This awareness of historical wounds is not just important, it is essential. It is only through understanding and acknowledging these wounds that both traditions can begin to truly reconnect. This is not about erasing differences or trying to make both sides the same. It is about recognizing each other as trees from the same garden, spiritually enriched by the profound diversity each represents. Imagine, if you will, the beauty of a garden made up of various trees, each unique, yet all contributing to the overall richness and depth of the landscape. It is not the uniformity of the trees that makes the garden beautiful, but their distinctiveness, each tree growing in its own way, yet rooted in the same soil. This perspective challenges us to look at history not through the lens of division, but through one of shared understanding and respect. It invites us to imagine a future where the shadows of the past are not forgotten, but where they no longer define our present and future relationships. A future where Jews and Christians, while maintaining their distinct identities, can coexist with mutual respect and recognition of each other's sacred traditions. Reconciliation, as difficult and challenging as it may be, holds the potential to transform the relationship between these two great faiths. It requires more than just intellectual understanding, it demands a deep emotional commitment to healing. This journey is not about erasing differences but embracing the richness that each tradition brings. By recognizing the pain of the past and working together to heal, we can foster a world where respect and love transcend historical divisions. As you reflect on this, I encourage you to think about your own views, whether you're Jewish, Christian, or from any other background. Can we, as a global community, learn to bridge our differences and honor each other's sacred journeys? This is not just a theological question, it's a question about how we, as human beings, choose to move forward together. If you found this video thought-provoking, share it with others. The journey toward understanding and reconciliation is long, but every step forward counts. Let's continue to learn, grow, and create a world that is more compassionate and inclusive for all.